341. Burning blonde hair. Those distant memories from his school days surfaced. There was a huge difference between practice and actual combat. The moment Vizette spoke the spell, Lockhart instinctively raised his wand and drew a straight vertical line across his chest. That was all he managed. A vivid red light blossomed before his eyes, and panic froze him. His mind went blank. He couldn't form the incantation for a shield charm, couldn't even open his mouth. When the red beam struck, Lockhart was hurled backward, slammed into the wall, and blacked out. Just before he lost consciousness, one thought flashed through his head. It's like Snape's stupefy, such a fast Expelliarmus. Mr. Lovegood, you may go. Snape took a few steps toward Lockhart, speaking with a clipped cadence and a sneer full of mockery. Professor Lockhart, I suppose I overestimated an adventurer's self-possession. I did warn you that beginners lack restraint. What a pity. Perhaps next time you can use your autobiography as a shield, he went on, voice sharpening. As a novice, Mr. Lovegood should, aim his Expelliarmus at your autobiography. His eyes glittered with ridicule. Of course, I mean nothing else. I'm certainly not suggesting your autobiography is more useful than you are. The Slytherin table erupted in cheers and laughter. The other houses laughed too, though with less abandon. The great hall filled with amusement. Only Ravenclaw looked uneasy. After all, Lockhart had once been one of them. But they reminded themselves this was a duel between two Ravenclaws and tried to accept it. Ron turned slightly, glanced at Lockhart sprawled on the floor, and muttered, This is the time I most want to be laughing with Slytherin. Professor Lockhart seems unconscious, Hermione said, frowning. Then let me try a reviving charm. Harry looked around, stepped forward, and raised his wand. Revive! Lockhart groaned and shook his head as he came back to himself. His wizard's hat had fallen askew, revealing hair standing every which way. Right? Compared to Snape's imagined stupefy, Vizette's Expelliarmus had been restrained, didn't crush Lockhart with pain or leave him unable to stand. A few remaining fans hurried forward and helped him to his feet so he could return to the stage. The book Vizette recommended really works, Harry said, twirling his wand. Expelliarmus? It's like a wave that knocks your opponent's weapon away. Slytherin laughed again. Lockhart, taking the wand his admirers had retrieved for him, held it up. See, that's what Expelliarmus does. My wand flew out of my hand. Of course, he grinned awkwardly. That was to demonstrate the effect. I offered no resistance, which produced an extra practical result. Snape cut him off. Perhaps we should do another demonstration. Show what spell can block an Expelliarmus. Ha! Professor Snape, you're so impatient. There's something more important to attend to. Lockhart let out two brittle laughs, his gaze skittering as he changed the subject. This is a dueling club. Next up, the students' turn. Vizette's demonstration was useful. Let's start practicing Expelliarmus. Professor Snape, assist with the pairings. In truth, Snape did the pairings. Lockhart slunk to a corner to fuss over his hair. While he used his wand like a curling iron, Snape patrolled the hall, pairing students for practice. He concentrated on matching Slytherins with Gryffindors, which added a delicious tension. Those two houses had never been on friendly terms. Draco Malfoy and Harry were paired together. Almost at once, they flicked their wands and cried, Expelliarmus! Their spells crossed. Draco's wrist was quicker. A thin red jet flickered from his wand, but only grazed Harry's wrist. Harry got his spell off too. A surge of red light erupted from his wand, but because his arm had been deflected, the beam flew wide and missed Draco. Vizette's demonstration and the explanation of the gestures had clearly sunk in. Most students could at least produce the red light. Snape, walking among them, noted that only a few of the younger students could cast a truly effective Expelliarmus. The ones nearest Vizette had learned to cast it reliably, and Harry had mastered the charm after just one round. Draco and Harry didn't waste time. After the first exchange, they went at it again. Draco's casting was still quicker, but Harry adapted, stepping 2 paces aside to avoid Draco's shot before chanting and sending his own red bolt. It hit Draco squarely and sent his wand spinning into the air. Ch! Snape's expression darkened as Harry grinned, but before he could scold, a scream cut across the hall. My hair! My hair! Lockhart, who'd been tending his coifer, staggered back. His golden hair was suddenly alight. A smell like rotten eggs, sulfur, spread through the great hall. He frantically waved his wand, pointing at his hair and trying to cast something, but the more he did, the worse it got. The flames ran to the roots. A senior student tried a vanishing charm, hoping to remove the burning hair, but the spell only made the flames flare higher. Finite incantatum. Snape strode forward, and with a casual flick, extinguished the blaze. It was too late. Lockhart collapsed, fainted to the floor, and his golden locks had been reduced to fine gray ash that floated and scattered across the flagstones. How awful! Fred and George Weasley moved closer, but their attention was more on the ash than the fallen professor. They scooped some up and slipped it into a pocket. Flames intensified by a vanishing charm, George observed. They vanished all right, but interesting for research. Wantonly desecrating a professor's remains, 5 points from Gryffindor. Snape walked past them, standing where Lockhart had been, his voice dry and scolding. 342, demo duel. Snape looked up and saw Harry a short distance away, wearing a curious expression, and he already knew what had happened. Harry's misdirected Expelliarmus had struck Lockhart as he fussed with his hair, causing some kind of wand backfire that set the man's golden curls alight. Hair damaged by unknown magic would be hard to fix with potion, if it could be fixed at all. Now was not the time to relish that fact. Snape still had to clean up the chaos Lockhart had left in his wake. Not all students could duel properly. Some abandoned their wands, and after several spells failed, resorted to the most direct method, hand-to-hand grappling. The situation worsened, and Snape had to continually sweep his wand to force the brawlers apart. He moved slowly to the center of the stage, eyes roaming over the students he'd just separated. "I almost thought I'd come to the wrong school," he sneered. "I thought I'd entered an arena. Fists and teeth. As wizards, can you not duel in another way? Even if you cannot learn Expelliarmus in an afternoon, are there no other spells you might use?" He glanced at Justin, still rigid as a statue on the floor. Finite incantatum. Snape flicked his wand and released Justin from the Petrificus Talus. 5 points from Gryffindor. He was sarcastic. "Professor Lockhart told you to use Expelliarmus, yet Mr. Longbottom, what did he do?" "Petrificus Totalis. You violated the fallen professor's instruction." Snape continued in that same clipped tone. "But still better than Mr. Midgen, Mr. Macmillan, Miss Fawcett, Miss Granger, each of you, 5 points." During the familiar Slytherin chorus of approval, Harry and Ron leapt forward to protest. It was that Slytherin who didn't follow the rules. Hermione was shoved. "Ah." Snape's smile was a hunter's. "Gryffindor loses another 10 points. Our Mr. Potter must be very proud of himself, thinking he followed the rules and could play a few tricks to style himself the victor. Mr. Potter, Mr. Longbottom, onto the stage, immediately." Neville climbed up somewhat uneasily, while Harry's face flared with anger. Snape's voice dripped malice. "Perhaps we need to witness a proper duel. I suppose you all want to see for yourselves, since you insist you defeated your opponents." I didn't, Neville blurted. "It was an accident. I can't do Expelliarmus." "Just as Professor Lockhart said," Snape drawled. "Have you forgotten dueling etiquette? Bow, keep your distance." Harry and Neville exchanged a look, then, following dueling form, took their stances. "Begin," Snape called out. "Let everyone see how you defeated your opponents. 3, 2, 1. "Expelliarmus," Harry cried. "Petrificus Totalis," Neville answered. They cast almost simultaneously. To Snape's surprise, Neville's Petrificus Totalis was very well executed. Despite the pressure, it struck true and Harry crumpled to the floor. Harry's Expelliarmus flashed red and knocked Neville's wand from his hand. "Finite incantatum." Snape flicked his wand, a glint in his eyes. "Mr. Longbottom, who taught you to cast Petrificus Talus like that?" Neville helped Harry to his feet, stammering as he met Snape's stare. "Dishonorable to the professor. 5 points from Gryffindor. Off the stage." Snape waved his hand, then scanned the great hall. "Mr. Lovegood, onto the stage." At Snape's summons, all eyes turned to where the Ravenclaw table sat. Whether from his role in last year's Quidditch Cup or the reading lists that had lately become popular, Vizette Lovegood had a small but definite fame. In Ravenclaw, the name Vizette Lovegood usually brought a few standard comments. "That's him. The reading lists I borrowed. So good. Quidditch star. He won last year. This year's cup will be ours again. He knows the library like the back of his hand. If you need a book, ask him. He'll tell you the shelf and the row." Snape had called Vizette to the stage without naming an opponent, and the students guessed who he meant. Luna clenched her fists and cheered, "Go!" Encouraging voices rose around the Ravenclaw table. Snape folded his arms. "Mr. Much Anticipated," he said, "you were able to teach Mr. Longbottom Petrificus Totalis. I suppose demonstrating how a duel should be conducted won't be difficult for you?" Vizette inclined his head. He'd expected this. The spells he had been learning lately could be demonstrated in stages on a dueling stage. "Show us what you've got," Snape said. "What I've got?" Vizette murmured, then understood and nodded to Snape. "Professor Snape, if you please." Snape acknowledged the bow with a slight nod. Vizette held his wand steady, like a sword at his chest. Almost at once, the students felt a change in the air. The impression Vizette gave was different now, like a soft velvet covering a very sharp blade finally showing its edge. The two raised their arms, and Vizette thrust his wand forward. A torrent of flame leapt from the tip. "Incendio!" Snape drew his wand sideways and, with an unhurried flick, sent out a streak of light that split the flames and struck back at Vizette with the force of a blade. The sword-like beam closed in fast. Just as many in the hall thought the duel was over, Vizette's wrist flicked and the blade light vanished as if it had never been. He had precisely blocked and erased it. Students erupted into quiet exclamations. "What is going on?" Nearby, Anthony, thinking of his great-aunt, a famed auror, tried to work it out. "If my great-aunt is right, then Vizette has mastered the severing charm well enough to erase a severing charm in that way," someone murmured in response. "But it's not something to be done lightly." 343. How many surprises or shocks are there? When Anthony spoke, the students around them pressed, "Why?" Anthony shrugged. "Without absolute certainty, without absolute confidence, it's not only hard to succeed, it can be dangerous to yourself." "Think about it," he went on. "If a fireball were coming at you, would you dodge it to avoid getting burned, or would you wave your wand and put it out?" He sighed. Vizette's way of stopping that attack just now was like that. If he hadn't been completely sure of what he was doing, his wand would probably have been snapped. Professor Snape did the same thing, Michael suddenly realized. He used a cutting spell to split Vizette's flame. The duel between Vizette and Snape continued. A red beam shot from Snape's wand and sped toward Vizette like an arrow. "Protego!" Vizette raised his wand and cast a shield charm. The red beam struck the shield and seemed to stick to it, condensing into a red orb that rippled outward. Vizette's lips trembled. He flicked his wand, and a faint white light ran along the shield's edge, driving the red orb back at Snape. Snape didn't speak an incantation this time. He conjured a blade of light that sliced the incoming shield in two. The shield didn't vanish. The faint white light at its edges converged like ignited fireworks and erupted into a blinding flare that swallowed Snape's form. "Why is Vizette's shield charm still glowing?" Michael asked, puzzled. Even Anthony had no answer. He spread his hands helplessly. Not even the older students could say why Vizette's shield charm produced that strange effect. Snape, however, had already seen through it. The flare wasn't part of the shield itself, but a concealed illumination spell woven into the charm. The casting technique echoed Vizette's Rubik's Cube theory, the same approach he used to parse potion recipes, a method Snape had heard about in private lessons. It was more ingenious than he'd expected. He could be a little freer with his next move, Snape thought. He thrust his wand forward, and the intense light vanished. His gaze locked onto Vizette, and he swept his wand in a horizontal arc, forming another, keener blade of light that tore through the air with a metallic rasp. "Aguamenti," he called. Vizette's face tightened. He responded with his own water-making spell, but the stream that burst from his wand was no ordinary jet. It was a torrent. Snape's eyelid twitched. There was transfiguration woven into the water-making spell. Only through transfiguration could a torrent hold its shape and not simply collapse the moment it left the wand. Students at the edges of the great hall heard a strange commotion outside and turned to the windows. In the faint moonlight, the black lake churned, a whirlpool forming at its center. Vizette swirled his wand, and the torrent began to undulate like a living snake. It obeyed the motion of his wand, lunging for the incoming blade of light and smothering it. Contained, the light dissipated. The water serpent coiled once around Vizette before shooting off with a rumbling surge towards Snape. Snape glanced at the floating candles and then raised his wand. The candle flames swelled and gathered, quickly forming a massive, living fireball. When he lowered his wand, the fireball split open and a lava-like flow poured from it, shaping into a long, fiery serpent. The hall felt scorched. Though it was December, the air took on the heat of summer. The two serpents, water and fire, collided in a brilliant eruption. Their forms collapsed, steam roiling up into the rafters. The fireball dispersed back into separate flames that settled into their wicks, still glowing and warm. Vizette, having measured the size of his torrent, ceased drawing from the black lake. The fiery serpent vanished, and the water serpent dissolved. Vizette looked at the lingering steam and the heat still in the air, then raised his wand. Freezing hail! The steam condensed into a dark, ominous cloud in an instant. A collective gasp rose from the hall. Students had been braced for heat a heartbeat earlier. Now, from blistering warmth, they were thrown into biting cold. Hailstones poured from the cloud, and under Vizette's control, they all concentrated on Snape's position. Clever, Snape murmured. He raised his wand and flicked it. The first words he'd said aloud during the duel sounded crisp in the hall. Protego totalum. A gray, translucent shield blossomed around him, absorbing the onslaught of hail. If this duel were being graded, he thought, he'd have to give Vizette a performance rating of O. Finite incantatum. Vizette immediately dispelled the dark cloud. Scourgify. He swept the ice and hail from the stage with a practiced motion. Expelliarmus. Seeing this, Snape raised an eyebrow and sent a red blast of light lazily from his wand. As the red light sped toward Vizette, Snape felt something stir inside him. In a little over a year, Vizette had already surpassed nearly every student in the hall. More importantly, Snape had no idea how much of his power Vizette was still concealing. More advanced transfiguration, a deeper theoretical grasp of magic, a competence with weather and elemental spells. He didn't know how many more surprises, how many more shocks Vizette might have in store. It was a demonstration match, though. Neither would risk going all out. Snape restrained himself from using any of the dark arts. He spun his wand once between his fingers, and sparks danced at the tip. Perhaps he had been in Hogwarts too long, and with the Dark Lord absent, subtle, hard-to-notice changes had crept into him. The Dark Lord would return, he thought. Those changes in himself were not good. Deciding then, Snape resolved to find a way to regain his former combat edge. 344. Study enthusiasm before Christmas break. The red light of Expelliarmus hit Vizette's arm, and his wand spun out of his hand, tumbling through the air. Professor Snape said coolly, "Concentrate. Mr. Lovegood, it's not time to clear the battlefield yet." Vizette bowed to Snape. "Thank you for your guidance, Professor Snape. There won't be a next time." He watched the wand fall, raised his hand, snatched it out of the air, and walked slowly off the stage. "Did you see that? This is what a wizard's duel should be like." Snape glanced around with his usual expressionless face. "I don't expect you to cast much magic, but you must hold your wands tightly. Understood?" The students nodded, staring at Vizette and at Snape with varying degrees of awe. The Slytherin's looks were the most complicated, part admiration, part disbelief. For a long while, the duel was the hottest topic at Hogwarts. Older students compared notes and tried to parse what spells and techniques Snape and Vizette had used. Snape had not shown much, and most of his magic had been nonverbal, but the essentials were clear: an unusually effective severing charm that could cut through nearly anything, a long, fiery serpent of magic, and a brilliantly flashed shield charm. Break those down, and you had one charm, one bit of transfiguration, and one defensive spell. From that, rumor-mongers spun a theory. Were these 3 spells chosen because Snape was a potions master? The severing charm could be useful for preparing potion ingredients, precise transfiguration for controlling cooking flames, and protective magic for safety in case of accidents. It was only conjecture, of course. Snape's temper was notorious, and even most Slytherins dared not verify it. That wasn't the only focus of discussion. Vizette's magic drew as much attention, partly because he had cast aloud, making every incantation clear. When students tallied what he'd done, they realized his style deviated noticeably from what they'd been taught. His transfiguration, for instance, was familiar in principle. Older students recognized that he was transfiguring water while maintaining its flow, but the scale was beyond usual classroom practice. Holding such a large volume of water without it collapsing was already a demanding feat. Vizette not only maintained the flow, he used it offensively, countering Snape's fiery serpent with a sustained stream. Doing that during a duel, keeping the transfiguration intact under pressure, seemed to be a level beyond standard instruction. The aqua ructo he used sparked even more surprise. In simple herbology lessons, aqua ructo usually produces a small jet of water from a wand tip to water plants. According to Hermione, Justin, and others, the aqua ructo Vizette invoked was on the scale of a fire hose, capable of dousing house fires. Many remembered the whirlpool that had formed near the Black Lake that night. It proved the torrent came from the lake itself. Older students concluded Vizette had mastered not only aqua ructo's mechanics, but how to apply its principles to far greater effect. Other mysteries remained. Why had Snape's shield charm burst with such dazzling light? Was the sudden hail-like precipitation a form of weather magic? Students pressed these questions to their professors. Flitwick and McGonagall listened to eyewitness accounts, analyzed the techniques involved, and praised Vizette's performance. Their approval made Vizette's abilities more concrete in students' minds and stirred intense curiosity. Vizette enjoyed the kind of attention that once belonged to Professor Lockhart. In fact, some of Lockhart's former devotees had already transferred their adoration to Vizette. They believed that if Vizette was this powerful now and nothing went wrong, his future achievements would be extraordinary. Becoming the next Albus Dumbledore was not, to their minds, out of the question. Vizette found the worship troublesome. He had a simple remedy, a thick book list of everything he'd read. Whenever a classmate wanted to know more, he handed them the list and explained his study methods. I summarize what I learn, jot down my thoughts and ideas, then review and revise periodically, adding new insights, he told them. Is it that simple? His admirers asked. Summarizing is crucial, Vizette said. Imagine boldly, experiment, and then ask the professors. They're excellent wizards. That's how I learned. Keep at it. Thanks to Vizette's encouragement and his book list, enthusiasm for studying surged before the Christmas break. Common rooms and the library were busy. Students asked more questions after lessons. The extra workload pleased the professors. Classroom efficiency had risen, and they were willing to share more techniques. Some rejoiced, others did not. Professor Lockhart, still convalescing in the hospital wing, did not rejoice. After the first couple of days when a few fans had visited, the visitors stopped coming. Worse, a new worry filled him with panic. Touching his bald scalp, he pleaded, "Madame Pomfrey, my hair. My hair really won't grow back at all." "I'm afraid not, Professor Lockhart," Madame Pomfrey said. "We've tried every common regrowth potion on you. None have worked. You're a very unusual case, an accidental wand backfire. There's no specific potion for that." 345. What kind of person is Vizette? As noon approached, Luna and Amy C. Miller left Hogwarts Castle and walked together toward the Quidditch pitch. Luna walked slowly, sometimes holding out her palm to catch a drifting snowflake. Winter had finally come to the Scottish Highlands, and light snowfall was part of its welcome. Today the flakes fell softly, like dandelion seeds tumbling in the air. Through the swirl of white, you could see the shy sun hiding behind scattered clouds. Amy C. asked, "Luna, what kind of person is Vizette usually?" "Like a unicorn, I think." Luna blew gently on the snowflake in her hand, sending it back into the air and letting the breeze carry it away. She remembered what Vizette had told Neville and Hannah when she visited him in the infirmary. Sometimes he will suddenly appear, offering guidance to the lost. She also remembered that when Vizette was deep in thought, she had to lead him all the way to the gargoyle statue. Sometimes he needs guidance too. Probably. I think I get it a little. Amy C. nodded, half understanding. I've met him a few times. He's really good-natured, and he speaks so calmly. They didn't hurry. By the time they reached the spectator stand, Madame Hooch was already standing at the center of the pitch. Amy C. rose on her toes and leaned forward to look. They're out. Where's our team? Over there. Luna pointed. Vizette was on the field, holding a shooting star broom. As both teams filed out, Lee Jordan's commentary rolled across the stadium. Let's look first at the Ravenclaw team. Leading the line is Chaser Roger Davies. This is his first match as captain. He drew breath, then shouted, and next, our Vizette Lovegood. In all my years of commentating, he's the most aggressive and fastest chaser I've ever seen. There's nobody like him." With him joining, Ravenclaw changed their tactics, swept away the decline of recent years, and stormed to the Quidditch Cup. The Duel Club incident was still fresh in everyone's minds, and Lee Jordan's praise sent the stands into an uproar of cheers. Ravenclaw students shouted the loudest, but many from other houses joined in. Lee Jordan introduced both teams quickly. It's worth noting that not only did Slytherin change their brooms, but Ravenclaw's equipment got an overhaul too. The Shooting Star isn't quite as good as the Firebolt 2001, but its speed is still excellent. Hufflepuff's in for a tough match. All right, mount your brooms. The game is about to begin. Madam Hooch's whistle blew, and the match started. As Lee had predicted, Hufflepuff struggled. Ravenclaw's whole strategy revolved around Vizette, and with the new broom, the plan had a higher ceiling. Vizette's on the attack. His speed. Goal. Ravenclaw opens with 10 points. Lee's voice crackled over the pitch. "Vizette, could you at least let me finish my line before you score?" He joked then. Vizette gets the quaffle again. "He's unbelievably fast. Another 10. Lee coughed twice, and Professor McGonagall beside him waved a hand and murmured a calming charm to steady him. With goal after goal, the crowd roared. Ravenclaw adds 20 more. That scoring pace is frightening. "Vizette, have you considered playing professionally?" Lee continued, chastened by his own excitement. "I really feel for Hufflepuff. Their defensive formations worked last year, but the Shooting Star's speed is stretching them thin. Vizette weaves between bludgers. Look at the bludger. It's tumbling. No respect for the bludger at all. Goal. Another 10, Lee gushed. Clearly he handles this broom well. Not just speed. His agility is incredible. Another goal. 10 more points." Hufflepuff called a timeout. The scoreboard read 80-0. In the Hufflepuff end, Cho Chang and Cedric Diggory were looking skyward as if their necks ached. "Nothing they can do at the moment," Lee said. "If they can catch the golden snitch quickly while the gap is still big, they might still have a chance." Up on the pitch, Vizette glanced upward, apparently hunting the snitch, but his gaze seemed fixed in one direction. Cho said uncertainly, "I think it might be over the southwest stands, but the snow's getting heavier, and Hufflepuff's stand is yellow and black. Maybe it's just my imagination." "If the snow gets worse, it'll bother them more than us," Roger Davies said, waving it off. "We can keep widening the gap with goals. They can only hope for the snitch." "Still, if we've spotted something, let's be sure," Roger added, thinking fast. He sketchily laid out a plan. "Jensen and Duncan, take the bludgers to disrupt Cedric and keep him busy. Then Cho will go check on the snitch's movement. That's how we play it." He patted Vizette on the shoulder. "Jensen and Duncan will switch targets later, so it might get harder for you." Vizette used a magic eye charm and focused toward the southwest stands. A shimmer of a magic circuit revealed the snitch's trace. He nodded to Roger. "No problem." "Good, then that's what we'll do." Roger exhaled, and the plan was set. Roger Davies clapped his hands and shouted, "Come on, let's win this match. Ravenclaw will win." "Ravenclaw will win," the Ravenclaw supporters shouted back. Madam Hooch blew her whistle, and both teams rose into the air again. Following Roger Davies' orders, Ravenclaw renewed their attack and their defense. Jason Samuels and Duncan Ingleby stayed close to Vizette, but they adjusted their positions and moved nearer to Cedric. Vizette's concentration was even sharper than before. While dodging the bludgers sent at him by Hufflepuff, he kept scoring for Ravenclaw. Hufflepuff's timeout was effective. Bludger attacks are coming faster and trickier than before. Vizette is like a cannonball. He stole the quaffle from Hufflepuff, Lee Jordan called excitedly. "Wollongong Z-shaped flying technique. Vizette's dodging. Ah!" He winced and then muttered, "Beautiful. Wollongong. Flying technique." "Raven, 10 points. Professor, my tongue." Lee stammered suddenly, eyes watering as he clamped his mouth open. Professor McGonagall leaned over, tapped her wand, and said, "Episky." The spell healed the small bite. "I bit my tongue," Lee explained, wincing. "But it's nothing. Actually, I wish Vizette would take it a bit easier and not pull out a pro move at every turn. But I have to say, that Wollongong." He broke off, glancing higher above the pitch. "No wonder there's a bludger constantly bothering Vizette. Ravenclaw's changed tactics." "Ravenclaw's beaters are harassing Cedric," came another voice on the commentary. A clever move. If they keep Cedric occupied, even if he catches the snitch, Hufflepuff won't be able to make up the score. That was close. Cedric looked distracted and nearly took a bludger to the chin. Now he's accelerating. He's headed straight for Ravenclaw's seeker, Cho Chang. I have to say, Cho Chang is lovely. Could Cedric be distracted by her? According to insiders, Cedric might... Lee began. Then McGonagall's patient clearing of her throat cut him off. Ahem. Focus on Cho Chang. Lee recovered. No, Cho Chang is chasing something. The snow's getting heavier. It's hard to see, but that must be the golden snitch. Cho Chang is after the snitch. That's Ravenclaw's real plan. Keep Cedric harassed so Cho can have a clear shot. Cedric realized that and was watching Cho Chang, which explains his distraction. Cho reaches for the snitch, just a bit more. Cedric's giving everything, rushing toward Cho. Cho Chang makes a sharp turn. The balance on that Comet 290 is amazing. The snitch seems panicked and is heading toward Cedric. Dangerous. Cedric shrugs off a bludger and closes fast. Cho's speed is incredible. They're getting closer. Something's about to happen. Cho Chang makes another move, successfully catches the golden snitch. The match is over. Congratulations to Ravenclaw for today's win. After the match, Ravenclaw returned to their changing room. Roger Davies was still grinning, pacing with his fists clenched. After the Christmas break, we still have two opponents, Slytherin and Gryffindor. Slytherin's Seeker is new, so their biggest threat will be their Nimbus 2001 and a few unusual tactics, someone added. Gryffindor are strong overall. Their broom quality is a bit lower, but their Seeker, Harry Potter, has a Nimbus 2000. That's a serious broom. Roger nodded. Harry's been outstanding in every match he's played. He could be a major threat. I still remember last season. How long did it take him to catch the snitch? The longer he takes, the better for us. We can use today's tactics. After a quick debrief, everyone left the changing room. Vizette cast a quick glance toward the stands and saw a flash of gold among the crowd. He turned to Roger. Roger, could I borrow 2 broomsticks? Roger handed him a broom and a key. Of course. Take these and return them to Madame Hooch afterwards. You aren't heading back yet? Roger asked as Vizette made for the spectator stands. Vizette found Luna there, slipping a small notebook into her pocket. I wanted to watch a bit longer, he said. Luna looked up and smiled, tucking a stray lock of wind-blown hair behind her ear with her little finger. She liked Quidditch, but not for the reasons most people did. The scores and wins mattered less to her than the small things that happened during a game. She noticed whether a snowflake scattered when it touched a player's cloak. She wondered whether spectators caught flakes in their mouths when cheering too loudly. She watched to see if broomsticks were nicked when players collided and what kind of twigs fell to the ground. Vizette sometimes imagined that if they lost, Luna might take out a paintbrush and say, "Look, this cloud looks just like you," because she saw the game as a collection of curious, beautiful details. When Luna was on a broom, she was relaxed and dreamy. She floated a little higher and watched Vizette as he swooped and rose. He made one sweep around her and then hovered beside her. "Did you get any inspiration?" he asked. Luna blinked and nodded. "But it's a secret." She held out her hand, plucked a single falling snowflake, and then gently blew it so it drifted away on the breeze. They lingered on the pitch a while longer, then walked back to Hogwarts Castle together. After lunch, Vizette found a tiny silver phoenix, his Patronus, flapping in front of him. He reached out and touched the little phoenix's forehead, as he often did. It spoke in Dumbledore's calm voice. "Vizette, if you have time, come to my office this afternoon." 347. Phoenix Nirvana. Cockroach heap. At the password, the gargoyle unlatched and leapt aside, revealing the spiral staircase beyond. Vizette felt a strange weakening wash over him as he stepped into the corridor toward the principal's office, an odd hot and cold shiver like the fevers he remembered from his previous life. With each step, the weakness deepened. The world around him blurred as if seen through heat haze. A faint scraping, like a match being struck, sounded in his ears. The distortion intensified. Floor, walls, and ceiling seemed to bleed together and melt. The air warmed steadily, but oddly, Vizette did not suffocate. The hot and cold waves faded. He felt as if a fish flopping on cracked earth had been returned to water. Slowly, everything sharpened, but the scene that resolved was foreign. At first, there was a single cluster of flame, then the blaze swelled in an instant. The fire roared like a storming tide, churning up thick smoke that rose and plunged again in a vortex, stoking the flames. Fire and smoke braided into shapes like crimson petals and black stamens, blooming into a sea of fiery flowers. As quickly as they bloomed, they withered. The sea of fire shrank until only the original cluster remained, and then even that winked out. Darkness fell, cold and absolute, and in that blackness two familiar, gentle eyes opened. Fawkes, the phoenix. A clear, long cry rang out as Fawkes emerged, wings flashing in the dark. Flames circled the bird in an endless, cyclical dance, sometimes chasing it, sometimes chased. The phoenix landed before Vizette, brilliant fire flaring outward until it seemed to ignite him as well. He felt no pain, only warmth and a surge of exhilaration. Fawkes spread its wings and lifted Vizette into the air, carrying him out of the darkness until the world around him felt familiar. Vizette staggered back into the corridor, drenched in sweat as if he had been pulled out of water. It was December, but he felt no cold. His palms themselves seemed to radiate warmth. He looked down and saw an orange-red mark on his palm in the shape of a phoenix with outstretched wings. The Wizard Combat Guide in his mind flipped open all at once. Pages fluttered free. The accumulated ancient magic power gathered into one of the loose pages, which slid back into the book. Where the page had been blank, new text appeared. Ancient magic, flame mastery, guides. Ancient magic to cast incendio, enhances magical power, summons a circle of flames when casting fire. Along with the page came a cascade of fire-related insights. Vizette settled into the guardian meditation method, calming himself and letting the knowledge flow in. He sorted, classified, and absorbed the new understanding until he felt ready. Then he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Incendio. A spark bloomed between his thumb and forefinger. As he opened his palm, the spark swelled into a blazing orb, quietly radiating heat and making the air shimmer. A chill crept over him. The phoenix mark on his palm was fading, and the cold closed in through his damp clothes. Vizette shook his wrist. The flame on his palm scattered, rolling out to cover his body like a cloak. For a moment, he was a man on fire, flames licking over him, but leaving his clothing and ornaments unscathed. The fire drew back into his hand a heartbeat later, and he felt refreshed, the cold banished. It was an experiment. With the new insights, he could control fire wandlessly, precise enough to dry sweat without singeing fabric. Eventually, maintaining and shaping flames could become an almost subconscious act. He thought of another memory, the dueling club, Snape's cold demonstration, the fiery serpent. Vizette closed his eyes and tried to recall the feel of it. He shaped the flame in his palm like soft clay. The dancing fire pulled inward, rounding into an egg of red heat. A small protuberance formed, and a tiny fiery snake wriggled free, coiling and twisting in midair. Vizette frowned. It was alive enough, but it felt wrong, too stiff. This wasn't simply a matter of incendio or transfiguration. How had Snape done it? It had been a duel against a classmate. It couldn't have been dark arts. A flash of realization hit him, the Patronus charm. He brought his wand to the tiny serpent's forehead and spoke, Expecto Patronum. The wand traced a smooth arc, a warm silvery glow bloomed from its tip, and the fiery snake followed the light, flowing and turning with fluid, animal grace, as if truly alive. Just then a cold voice cut through the corridor. Vizette, how are you here? 348. The Secret of Snape, the Potions Master. Vizette turned toward the spiral staircase and found Professor Snape standing there in his black robes. In Snape's hand was a freshly brewed potion, still steaming. The liquid was a clear emerald green, and a faint, milky white halo shimmered across its surface with the steam. It was Baruffio's brain elixir, Madame Pomfrey's favorite example, and something she was always warning Vizette never to take lightly. The halo was one of the elixir's signs. As the potion cooled, the halo would fade. Professor Snape, Vizette said, bowing slightly. Headmaster Dumbledore sent me. Your hand. Snape's eyes narrowed as he looked at Vizette's palm, which was holding the fire-making charm. Imbuing it with sentience using the Patronus charm. Did you devise this yourself? Yes, Professor, Vizette nodded. During your dueling instruction, I felt there was something different about that fiery serpent. That fiery serpent was unusual. At first I thought it should have been a combination of the fire-making charm and transfiguration, but it didn't feel right. The serpent wasn't sentient enough. I tried a different approach, trying to recreate that feeling. I thought of the Patronus charm. Your guidance on exploring the soul made me consider it. You told me that chanting could let someone consciously explore the inner self, so I changed my thinking and tried, through chanting, to consciously imbue the external. The process of imbuing the external was harder than I expected, so what I can do is limited, but at least, he lifted his arm. The fiery serpent writhed more lively this time, coiling around him and giving off a faint warmth. It looks much livelier now. Snape's voice remained cold, but he conceded, the general idea is correct. His tone was colder than usual, but for some reason Vizette sensed a stiffness behind Snape's words, as if he did not want to talk about it. Vizette opened his mouth to say more, but Snape went on. Observe. You must continue observing. If you want to create a fiery serpent, study snakes. Learn as much as you can about them, their behaviors, their abilities. Imbue what you learn into the charm through the Patronus. Its resemblance to what you've studied will increase. Vizette swallowed and reorganized his thoughts. Professor Snape, is this a process of making the illusory real? Suppose you observe an Ashwinder from birth to death. As your understanding deepens, and with the sentience added by the Patronus, he faltered. Then Vizette hurried on. Could you truly transform into an Ashwinder, or have an Ashwinder lay eggs? Eggs you could harvest for potions? Snape's eyes widened. He looked at Vizette again, then spoke slowly. That is the work of a potion master. It isn't true transformation into an Ashwinder. What we want are the qualities of an Ashwinder egg. He paused. I don't know how other potion masters do it, but I achieve it by imbuing characteristics through the Patronus. Besides, no wizard has that much spare time. This method is used when a necessary ingredient is missing or when a recipe must be altered temporarily. I see. Vizette let out a long breath. So the only way forward in potions is continuous study of ingredients and a deep understanding of their characteristics. He remembered a book he'd seen in the library, shelved oddly under History of Magic, but filled with marvels that wizards called magical. It told of a wizard named Gobalot, who supposedly could make potions from nothing but a cauldron, water, and sugar. If a potion master could truly understand everything well enough, perhaps one could really do that, create potions with only water, sugar, a cauldron, and fire. Even so, Vizette had more questions. Professor Snape, we've been talking about potions. Could the Patronus method of imbuing sentience be pushed further in Transfiguration? You haven't given up? Snape raised an eyebrow. His gaze grew more complicated. What do you have in mind? A living Ashwinder can continue to live. Life is terribly complex. Vizette hesitated. I mean, don't think about it as literal transformation. The idea of changing something into a true living Ashwinder is wishful thinking. Snape's voice rose. You can only observe one aspect of the Ashwinder. How can you know it has no other side? Life is vibrant, three-dimensional. No one can encompass it wholly. Even if you could reconstruct an Ashwinder from memory, what then? It would be a mere puppet, moving by your will, no real substance, no true life. It would have no practical meaning. His words grew louder and sharper, until reprimand edged into something harsher. For a heartbeat, intense pain crossed Snape's features, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He was himself again, cold, impenetrable, distant. Vizette blinked, a little disoriented, as though he'd caught sight of a mirage. Professor Snape, he began. Snape cut him off abruptly. Do you know what this potion is? Baruffio's brain elixir, Professor, Vizette answered without hesitation. The halo on the potion's surface had already thinned, and the steam had dwindled. Very good. Ravenclaw loses 1 point. Snape thrust the cup at Vizette. Since you're here, take it to Dumbledore. Ravenclaw gains 1 point. Correct answer and a lost point. Then the point returned. Watching Snape hurry away down the staircase, Vizette felt oddly puzzled. Perhaps it was just one of those quirks of a hawthorn wand, he thought. He released the fiery serpent in his hand, glanced at the slightly trembling cup, and walked into the headmaster's office, holding it with both hands. Dumbledore must have gone out to meet someone. The office door was open. Vizette looked to the bird stand. The old phoenix fox was not there. Instead, a pile of ashes lay on the floor. 349. professor of werewolf studies. A faint smell of smoke hung in the headmaster's office. The ashes on the floor hadn't completely cooled. Every so often a spark spat out, the coals within them pulsing with a low crimson light, as if breathing. Vizette set the potion on the desk and stepped toward the pile beneath the bird stand. No wonder everything had been so strange. He had already seen the phoenix imprint on his palm and felt certain the connection between that mark and the phoenix had always been there, and it had allowed him to witness Fawkes's nirvana. Fawkes had lingered in that precipice for a long time, always on the verge of flaring into flame and being reborn from the ashes. Now the crimson glow faded entirely. The ashes shivered, and a tiny, wrinkled head pushed up through them. Fawkes found his bearings and rolled out, shook himself, and looked back at the ashes. They rose with a soft whoosh and then scattered over his feathers, melting into his skin as if reattaching themselves. Vizette reached out to pick him up when a metallic clank sounded from outside and a hoarse, battered voice called through the room. I should have killed it. That thing just now looked disgusting. Definitely not good stuff." "Artem, thank you for your concern, but there's no need," came Dumbledore's kind, patient reply. "We're nearly there. Albus, can his memory really be restored? I've searched with many wizards and none have helped," another older, gentler voice asked. "Marlowe, we must have hope," Dumbledore said calmly. "Given how Artem is now, we can't delay." The voices drew closer. Vizette set Fawkes back on the bird stand, smoothed his robes, and waited for Dumbledore to bring the others into the office. Dumbledore entered first, smiling when he saw Vizette. "Vizette, this is Professor Marlowe Furfang, and this is Artem Avakian." Marlowe Furfang had graying temples, a thick silver-gray beard, and heavy dark circles under tired eyes. Artem Avakian looked even older, hair and beard the unhealthy white of old wax, his face and hands marred with scars. His robe, once black, was streaked with stains, black, white, gray, yellow, so that it now resembled a patchwork of neglect. The hem clinked with a faint metallic sound whenever he moved. Before Vizette could speak, Artem shouted, not at him but at the headmaster's portrait across the room. "So many merpeople. They're ambushing us, planning to attack. No problem. Watch me kill them." He rummaged in his robe and produced a rolled newspaper like a stick, brandishing it wildly as if ready to duel a portrait. He murmured an incantation, then another, each one directed first at the portrait, then at a nearby cabinet, clearly locking onto the sorting hat within. Dumbledore caught the flying potion and pushed it toward Marlowe. "Marlowe, this is the Baruffio's brain elixir you asked me to prepare." "Excellent quality," Marlowe exclaimed, moving closer to Artem and lifting the cup. "Do me the honor. I'll toast you." Artem took a step back, clutching his robe to steady the metallic clinks. He eyed the cup suspiciously. "Does this cost money? You're not going to make me pay after I drink it, are you?" "You lot are terrible. I've lost all my leverage." "Of course not," Marlowe said quickly. "This is on me." "All right, then. Cheers." Artem laughed and opened his mouth wide. Marlowe poured the potion, and Artem downed it in one gulp, belched, and finally quieted. He stood dazed but calmer. "Top quality," Marlowe muttered, placing the empty cup on the desk with a great sigh of relief. Before, it would take half an hour at least to soothe him. Vizette stepped forward and bowed. "Professor Furfang, I am Vizette Lovegood. Pleased to meet you." "Vizette Lovegood?" Marlowe murmured, peering at him. "Pleased to meet you." Dumbledore tapped the desk and a teapot with cups appeared. "Sit, please. Have some hot tea and a bite to warm yourselves." Once Marlowe had settled, Vizette glanced again at Artem, who was still standing. "Wait a little while," Marlowe said. "The Baruffio's elixir has just taken effect. He'll be fully himself in a bit." "All right." Vizette nodded and took a seat. Marlowe tilted his head toward Vizette. "When Damocles visited me before, he mentioned a newly appointed junior potioneer in England. He said the junior potioneer was a student, but unusually skilled," Dumbledore added. "I think he must have meant you." Vizette smiled modestly. "If there isn't another Vizette Lovegood who is also a junior potioneer in England, then it must be me." "Professor Snape taught me well," Vizette confessed. "I mostly brew standard potions, so my work is steady. I still have a lot to learn." Marlowe nodded, a benevolent smile softening his features. A good lad." "Damocles," Dumbledore said with a smile as he dropped 3 sugar cubes into his black tea. "Was that Damocles Belby who came to see you?" Marlowe nodded. We've been in touch. After he received the Order of Merlin, he came to thank me. Vizette listened quietly from the sidelines, finally following the conversation between Dumbledore and Marlowe Frown. Damocles Belby was also a potion master, and according to the Daily Prophet, he had just received an Order of Merlin, first class, for inventing the Wolfsbane potion. Marlowe Frown, on the other hand, was an unrivaled authority on werewolves, perhaps the first of his kind. He had spent long stretches of time living among werewolves, disregarding his own safety to observe their habits and compile many theories. The fact that Belby had been singled out for thanks by Damocles suggested that Frown had supplied a lot of valuable information. Marlowe chatted with Dumbledore for a while, then turned his attention to Vizette. "Albus, no one else is coming, right?" He glanced toward the door, sipped his black tea, and added, "The person who can help restore memories." "Is it Vizette?" Dumbledore said. "It's not that I don't trust you, Marlowe, but he's very young. I've actually consulted many potion masters before, including Damocles." "Marlowe, I understand," Dumbledore said gently. "It's natural to be cautious, but at least we should try." He pushed a blueberry cake toward Frown and refilled Vizette's teacup. "Vizette, tell us in detail. Mr. Altum, what book is he the protagonist of?" "Explain in detail," Vizette blinked, gathering his thoughts over a sip of tea. "When I was in Mr. Avakian's room just now, I heard a clinking outside the door. Coins, bronze nuts. When Mr. Avakian looked around and spoke to me, he kept mentioning one word, chips. In Wandering with Werewolves, chips is a recurring term. The protagonist of that book uses it a lot, so Mr. Avakian should be that protagonist. There's an even simpler way to see it," he continued. "Professor Frown is an authority on werewolves, and the Prophet reported Belby winning an award for the Wolfsbane potion. Two werewolf-related elements, Belby and Frown, are connected to Mr. Avakian. It points to the same conclusion." He went on to explain the story's connections. The beginning of Wandering with Werewolves actually ties into Voyage with Vampires. After the protagonist sends a vampire home and wins favor with the vampire's sister, he flees the manor rather than be bound in marriage, taking only a handful of bronze nuts. He hides in a village where dark wizards gather, using those bronze nuts as chips to make small bets and build a reputation. Inevitably, he attracts the attention of a dark wizard pulling the strings, the twist being that the mastermind is a werewolf. On a full moon night, the protagonist casts a spell to restore the werewolf to human form. The werewolf follows him out of the village, and they wander together. Whenever the word chips appears in the book, it's the protagonist's triumphant cry after a gamble won. "All the magic I wield are chips I bet on the outcome. I have so many chips you can never beat me." At that, Altum Avakian, who had been standing, seemed to clear his head and collapsed into a chair. "Chips, those are good things," he murmured. "Marlowe, what do you think now?" Dumbledore asked. "What I really wanted to say is that he's quite familiar with Lockhart, and he's learned a few tricks." Marlowe's face registered sudden understanding. "You mean that memory charm even you find difficult to break?" Before Dumbledore could answer, Avakian brightened. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's try it now." "If I don't have Barufio's brain elixir, I'll go mad every day," Avakian said. "I might as well gamble. Even one chip is still a chance." Since the subject has no objections, Dumbledore smiled wryly. "Vizette, you may try." "All right." Vizette looked at Avakian. "Mr. Avakian, is the sense of accomplishment after winning chips the feeling you like most?" Avakian's eyes lit up. "Of course, especially when you start small and win big. It's like drinking a large pot of mandrake leaf tea." Vizette cleared his throat and nodded. "I understand. Sense of accomplishment as the fulcrum. Then I'll begin." He raised his wand, pressed it gently against Avakian's temple, and spoke the counter-curse to the memory charm, suspended in thought. With his growing understanding of mental magic, Vizette's casting was steadier than before. He used Avakian's memory of triumph, the feeling of victory, as his entry point to pry the charm loose. But nothing happened the way he expected. In the sweep of Avakian's memories, Vizette found no trace of anything altered by a memory charm. He opened his eyes and reported honestly. "Headmaster Dumbledore, I didn't find any affected memories. I'm afraid the memory is with Lockhart." Dumbledore nodded with the mild acceptance of a man who had hoped for better. "You did well, but it's not completely surprising." Marlowe Franz shrugged and let out an exasperated sigh. Avakian spat. Looks like I lost. That bastard is really cunning. Actually, I still have one question. Vizette looked at the three men. Professor Frown, since you know Belby, why not ask him for a solution? If Belby supported an accusation, perhaps Professor Lockhart could be formally investigated without restoring Mr. Avakian's memory. Marlowe's smile was wry and uncertain. It's mostly on me, Avakian interrupted with a shrug. I'm not exactly a saint. I chase trouble with dark wizards and dangerous creatures because the rewards are high. My hobby is... He dug into his pocket and pulled out a handful of bronze nuts. Starting small and winning big. That's why I love bronze nuts. Individually, they're worthless, but a pile of them looks impressive. Because of that taste, few people are willing to testify for me. I even have a criminal record in Armenia. Without concrete memories, nobody will believe me. That's the problem. That Marlowe Frown said. Gilderoy Lockhart is very clever. He specifically targets those less reputable wizards. That's why he's so hard to detect. 351. False memories to lure out the enemy. When Gilderoy Lockhart stole other people's achievements, he preferred targets who lived cut off in remote mountains and had little contact with the outside world. Coupled with the oddities of those reclusive wizards themselves, any stranger who noticed something off would usually blame it on a failed experiment or a potion mishap. In other words, Lockhart had taken meticulous steps to keep his secret. If not for a fortunate stroke of luck and being found out by Dumbledore and his allies, he would probably have remained undetected unless he did something conspicuously outstanding. Vizette raised a question. Headmaster Dumbledore, if Lockhart had kept up the act and avoided attracting attention, then he probably wouldn't have been discovered, Dumbledore agreed. Even if someone wanted to verify him, he could always claim to be researching source material and temporarily withdraw from the public eye. Once the controversy subsided, he'd return with new books that would also serve to silence earlier doubts. So why did he come to Hogwarts? Yes, Dumbledore nodded. People have desires. Profiting from writing is only the first step. After wealth and popular recognition come loftier ambitions, the kinds of honors he never stopped name-dropping. Vizette grimaced as the familiar litany echoed in his mind. I, Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin, 3rd class. Lockhart loved to recite those titles before getting students to play along in his lessons. Dumbledore went on. When Lockhart felt he had the admiration of others and a comfortable fortune, he wanted more. Coming to Hogwarts to teach, winning Harry's favor, and even his support would let him go much further. That was the lure I told him about. That's why he accepted a post here. He couldn't refuse the chance to be the professor of the Savior. The impact of Lord Voldemort still lingered in people's speech. Why else call him you-know-who or he who must not be named? Harry's defeat of Voldemort and the collapse of his followers allowed the magical world of Britain to return to something like normal, and the prestige that came with that was enormous. Vizette looked at Dumbledore. So if it weren't for that ambition, he wouldn't have left his safe routine at all. Right, Dumbledore said simply. Have you thought of a way to use that? I have an idea, Vizette considered. Since Lockhart won't easily leave Hogwarts, we can use Mr. Avakian to prick him, just enough to make him suspicious. Dumbledore stroked his beard and smiled. Before, you proposed luring the snake out of its hole. Now you want to startle the snake by rustling the grass. Vizette explained his plan. From what I understand of mind magic and memory, it's actually fortunate that Avakian is experiencing mental confusion. Artem Avakian and Marlowe Fufang both looked puzzled. What does that mean? They asked. Dumbledore answered for him. It means the memory wasn't destroyed, merely hidden and preserved. Think of a memory as a dessert in a cabinet. In Artem's case, one dessert and its drawer have been completely pulled out, leaving an empty space that disturbs the arrangement of other memories. If that memory had been erased entirely, the cabinet would have resealed itself and no one would notice the gap. But because it's hidden, that empty slot affects the rest. He plucked up a toffee finger biscuit for emphasis. Vizette, continue. Vizette nodded. Lockhart's theories are powerful. It looks as though he could master them precisely because those memories weren't destroyed. He must revisit them regularly to answer questions, to avoid forgetting what's in his books, and thus to reduce the chance of being exposed. If Mr. Avakian appears and shows signs of confusion, Lockhart will suspect that the preserved memories have been tampered with, and he'll go check. I understand, Artem laughed eagerly. Once that rat feels guilty, we'll know where the memory is hidden. His grin faded. But my current state is awful. Even with Barufio's brain elixir, I can't stay awake long enough. Vizette said, because the story in Wandering with Werewolves is your own experience, we can create a temporary slot to stand in for the real one. You can do that? Artem asked, surprised, turning to Dumbledore. You can actually go that far? Marlowe's expression matched his confusion. Dumbledore smiled. Magic is peculiar, yes, but this sort of thing will require Vizette's involvement. Didn't I tell you when I brought you here? I have a very capable helper, Dumbledore added, producing a silver thread from his robes and handing it to Vizette. Go on. Vizette had been refining his leverage theory from what he had learned. What it could do was more than simply break memory charms. He remembered Archimedes' famous line, "Give me a fulcrum, and I shall move the world." The analogy fit his work. As his theory deepened, the things he could lever with a single fulcrum multiplied. Right now, he proposed using the sense of accomplishment after winning the prize as that fulcrum. With it, he could manipulate Artem Avakian's memory slot and insert a false memory constructed by Dumbledore. Dumbledore's eyes shone. If we can make Lockhart think the preserved memory was damaged or replaced, he'll inspect where he keeps it. And if he probes, he may reveal how he hides other memories. So we manufacture a small crisis in Artem's recollection, Vizette said, one that compels Lockhart to check those archives. The trick is to make it believable while keeping Artem safe. Artem's face hardened. Do it. If it brings my memory back, even a sliver, then I'll accept whatever risks. Dumbledore nodded. We'll proceed carefully. I'll help anchor the false memory and guide Vizette's leverage so the replacement reads as authentic to Lockhart. But Vizette will need the silver thread for the finer work. Vizette wrapped the thread around his wand lightly, almost reverently. I'll do my best. We'll construct a memory that fits both Artem's experience and the sort of details Lockhart would expect to find. If Lockhart believes the new slot is the original, he'll probe his own stores to reconcile the discrepancy, and when he does, he'll expose himself. Marlowe glanced between them and let out a breath. If this works, it's very clever. If Lockhart is as meticulous as you say, he'll check every hidden place. We just need to be sure the bait is tempting enough. That is the fulcrum, Vizette replied. Pride, the joy of recognition. Lockhart will rush to confirm whether his source has been compromised. We just have to make sure the false memory is irresistible. Dumbledore's calm voice closed the discussion. Then let us prepare. There are precautions to take. Timing, the exact phrasing of the memory, the way it fractures Artem's recollection. But with the silver thread and Vizette's leverage, we have a good chance of making Lockhart take the bait. They set to work, the three of them moving through the delicate business of constructing a false memory that would be seen and believed, and that would, they hoped, draw out the true culprit by making him come to check what he thought was safe. 352. A magic potion that appears out of nothing? The procedure went smoother than Vizette had expected. Dumbledore's shaping of the false memories was precise, so precise that the inserted recollections slid into Artem Avakian's mind as if they had always been there. Vizette couldn't help but think Dumbledore must have prepared everything well in advance. Otherwise, he couldn't have achieved that level of completeness so quickly. When the effect of Barufio's brain elixir finally wore off, Artem did not descend into confusion. He clutched his head, closed his eyes, and after a moment said, "It feels like it's recovered." Mallow Fufang stared at Vizette with a hint of astonishment. "This is incredible," Artem blinked slowly. "But why do things that used to interest me feel less interesting?" "Artem, you should stay at Hogwarts for a while," Dumbledore said gently. "There are some things you'll need to avoid." Artem nodded, flatly amused. "Right. Anyway, shuffling and dealing are important steps. Now we just wait for that bastard to fall into the trap." Vizette left the headmaster's office with Professor Snape's words echoing in his head, imbuing characteristics through the Patronus charm to create potion. He had spent the day practicing the fulcrum theory, but his biggest gain had been the conversation with Snape. The possibility of brewing a potion from nothing set his nerves tingling. He had to try it. New knowledge needed to be tested to become real. He found himself in the potions classroom before he realized it, standing at his locker. The ingredients I know well enough and whose characteristics are simple, he muttered as he opened it. Horned slugs and dried nettles. To brew a boil cure, I'll also need snake fangs and porcupine quills. He rummaged for the remaining fangs and quills. Then, taking a deep breath, he raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. He attempted to construct the steamed horned slugs directly, following Snape's method, but with his own twist. The Patronus charm would be the construction method, and the construction process itself would be organized through a magic circuit of his own design. He used the Patronus to mobilize his inner essence and carve the magical pattern of the horned slug. It was mentally exhausting work, constant, intense concentration, and the incorporation of ancient magic to speed the formation. Each completed construct sent a momentary blackness behind his eyes and a wave of dizziness. To avoid collapsing into the hospital wing, he rested a long time between efforts. What he produced wasn't a slug in the usual sense, but an extract, a fluid-like manifestation. The horned slug extract was deep black, the dried nettle extract a shriveled yellow. Vizette set his cauldron and added the ingredients in the steps used to brew the boil cure. Years of studying with Snape made even a simple potion second nature, and the cauldron soon exhaled a pure pink smoke. Vizette felt a thrill. The method worked. That legendary realm, just water and sugar, fire and cauldron, suddenly seemed closer than ever. If he could brew a potion from nothing, he thought, how different is that from casting a spell to produce a particular effect? Why should there be a difference? Snape's voice cut through the room. Vizette turned. Snape stood watching him with his usual unreadable expression. Whether it's potion or spell, both are the province of a wizard, Snape said. A muggle could follow the same steps and end up with a pot of poison. You can even think of it this way. Each syllable of a spell, broken down, corresponds to different kinds of potions. The boundary between them needn't be so rigid. Vizette tried to parse it. Professor Snape, do you mean? You don't need to understand all of that yet. Snape crossed his arms. First, you must lay a proper foundation, learn the characteristics of ingredients completely. Only then can you go further. He stepped aside and added dryly, and I don't want a bothersome ghost, one who died suddenly, lingering around my classroom. Vizette blinked. He conjured a small mirror and saw his own heavy-lidded eyes. He looked exhausted. Hastily, he tidied the potions classroom, then bowed. Professor Snape, I'll go back and rest now. Snape picked up the bottle of boil cure and examined its color. His eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly, his cheeks tightening, but he said nothing. He turned and returned to his office in silence. Christmas break was only a few days away. In the hospital wing, Lockhart held a small mirror and winced at his reflection. Bloodless, gaunt, the top of his head gleaming with a shine brighter than any of his old coiffures. He felt muddled. Being confined to the hospital wing had been like being cut off from the world. He'd seen Ravenclaw students celebrating through the crack of the door and Filch prowling the corridors, but no one had come to visit him. Is my bed too far in? He muttered to himself. I'm the defense against the dark arts professor. I've been gone for so long. Does no one notice? Madame Pomfrey entered, and seeing his mirror, offered practical comfort. Gilderoy, you should be brave. Try a wig. It's an option. Oh. Lockhart's agreement was thin and sheepish. He slipped the mirror into his pocket and slowly stood. Potion work hadn't made his hair grow back, but his notebook had helped him recover some spellcasting ability. It was time to leave. He took a long, steadying breath, forced a smile, set his wizard's hat firmly on his head, and walked out of the hospital wing. Tell me a way to get rid of Dumbledore. Lockhart hugged his hat to his head as he walked, making a point of warding off even the smallest draft. It was just after class, and the corridor buzzed with whispers and curious faces. Why is Professor Lockhart still here? I thought he left Hogwarts. Hurry, we've got potions next. Don't give Snape any excuse to dock points. The murmurs prickled Lockhart more than usual. He sighed and hurried toward a familiar student. Amatina, what's our next class? Professor Lockhart? It's History of Magic, Amatina said, surprised, though not in the delighted way Lockhart would have preferred. Her expression seemed to ask, "Why are you even here?" "History of magic?" Lockhart tried to keep his smile in place and tightened his grip on his hat. "What about defense against the dark arts? Is there a substitute?" "Yes." Amatina nodded. "An old wizard said he was from Armenia. He told us to call him Professor Avakian." At the name, Lockhart felt the world tilt. For a moment he went pale, the corridor sounds blurring. Amatina reached out. "Professor Lockhart, are you all right?" He swallowed and forced his voice steady. "Where is Avakian?" "He should still be in the defense classroom. We have another lesson after this." Amatina frowned at his color. "You really don't look well." "Fine," Lockhart said too quickly and hurried off. The defense classroom wasn't far. Heads turned as he entered. The students' surprised looks made his stomach lurch. He had to force himself to ignore them, focusing instead on the figure at the front. The name on the lip of his mind resolved into flesh, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Artem Avakian, he managed. The man at the desk yawned and stretched, still grumbling. "Teaching is hard work. I'm exhausted." He glanced up at Lockhart when his name was spoken. "You mean me?" Lockhart broke out in a cold sweat. "Why? Why are you here?" Avakian twisted and cracked his knuckles. "Mr. Dumbledore asked me to help, so I came." "How did he find you?" Lockhart stepped forward as if proximity might prove the man's identity. "Who exactly are you?" Avakian raised an eyebrow. "You don't look like a student. Why are you here?" Lockhart forced out, "I'm the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Gilderoy Lockhart." "You only turn up now?" Avakian said with a rough laugh. "How long have I been covering for you, then? That galleon was easy." "Don't you recognize me?" Lockhart demanded. Avakian shrugged, unconcerned. "You're not exactly unforgettable to me." Then he clamped a hand to his forehead and hissed, "Ow! Damn it! This again!" He fumbled in his pocket, hauled out a metal can, and took a long gulp. Lockhart watched him closely. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. "Who knows?" Avakian snapped, then scowled and shook the can. "It tastes foul. My memory's damaged. I have to take this to keep myself going." "Memory damage?" Lockhart's voice betrayed his eagerness. "How did it happen? Why do you care?" Avakian said impatiently. "Since you're back, I can go get treatment." "What treatment?" Lockhart felt in his pocket reflexively. "If you tell me, I'll pay. 1 galleon." Avakian's eyes lit up. "You'll give me a galleon to answer?" 1 galleon per question, Lockhart said with solemn theatrics. "You answer first, then come to my office and I'll hand it over." Avakian grinned and held up a hand. "Ask then. I'm in Hogwarts. No fear you'll back out." "Why is your memory damaged?" Lockhart asked. "I don't know. That'll be 1 galleon." "All right." Lockhart fumbled another galleon from his pocket without thinking. "Who's helping you get it back?" "Mr. Dumbledore. That's 2 galleons." "Has it been getting better?" "Only a little. A small block of memories from a few years ago hasn't come back. If I keep taking the medicine, it might be okay in about a year." Lockhart's heart thudded. "What's the worst thing you've faced?" Avakian's expression darkened. "I once ran from a debt into a village of less savory folk. I met a werewolf. He chose a full moon to duel me. I nearly got bitten. Really dangerous. Don't want to be a werewolf." He paused, then added, "That'll be 4 galleons." Lockhart's mind raced. If that blocked memory returned, would you know who did it? "If it came back, besides not having headaches, I'd know who messed with me. I'm gonna get them, whoever they are." A roaring sound filled Lockhart's head until he felt like he would burst. A small block of lost memories, only from a few years ago. The implications unspooled in front of him like a ribbon. Dumbledore helping Avakian recover. Avakian remembering who had harmed him. The possibility that Dumbledore's involvement could be revealed. "I'll get you the galleons now." He swayed out of the classroom, barely aware of the students watching him. From behind came Avakian's casual reminder, 5 galleons. Don't forget." Lockhart stumbled back to his office like a man in a dream. He sat down and groped for the little black notebook he kept hidden, the one labeled with an initial and a name he hadn't dared address aloud before, T.M. Riddle. His hands trembled as he wrote, neat and deliberate. "You said you could drive Dumbledore away? Tell me how." He watched the ink dry, lips pressed together, then added another line, softer and more personal. "Also, can you help me grow my hair back?" 354. The Initial Animagus Thesis. As the Christmas holidays approached, Hogwarts grew progressively livelier. Conversations among the students shifted from exams and homework to plans and fantasies about what they'd do and where they'd travel over the break. With the dueling club fading from daily chatter, Vizette relaxed into his usual rhythm of study and life. Most of his energy during this time went into his animagus work. Every morning and evening, he would take out his wand, press the tip against his chest, and recite a long string of incantations. During the ritual, he could feel a second heartbeat, and, along with a strange, irresistible curiosity, a different image would come to him, a burning flame that rose and rolled like a surge. The image was uncannily familiar, precisely the Nirvana scene he'd glimpsed through the Phoenix Mark when Fawkes underwent Nirvana. The vision kept shifting. With each repetition of the incantation, the flame grew clearer and began to take shape, solidifying into something like an egg. That was why Vizette planned to wait until after Christmas to go into the Forbidden Forest to look for the mysterious altar and attempt to summon a thunderstorm with a weather charm. If he wasn't mistaken, his animagus form might be an extraordinarily rare creature, a phoenix. With that hope in mind, the work on his animagus thesis formally began. After consulting with Professor McGonagall, Vizette set his thesis topic, improving the success rate and safety of the animagus transformation. Because successful animagi were so rare and the whole process took so long, he needed more than his own experience and Professor McGonagall's guidance. He had to collect and corroborate a large amount of literature. Outside of classes, Vizette spent nearly all his time in the library. He finished an official outline before the holidays and then expanded it into a full first draft. After one class, Vizette walked out with Professor McGonagall and handed her the notebook. "This is," she began, taking it, and her expression changed the moment she saw the title. "The first draft of your animagus thesis?" "Yes, Professor McGonagall." Vizette nodded, a little apologetic. "I was a bit tied up before. I gathered you've been studying weather charms and had a few unexpected delays," she said as she flipped through the pages. "You put this first draft on hold for a few days, and now you've finished." Professor McGonagall read quickly, her tone a mix of surprise and approval. "The level of completion." "It's not as complete as it should be," Vizette interrupted, more apologetic. "Because of some special circumstances, I postponed the final step. The draft only covers the first stages. I left out the section about taking the potion during a thunderstorm. I know that affects the integrity of the argument." McGonagall hummed softly and looked at him. Just as Vizette opened his mouth again, she reached out, patted his shoulder, and smiled to reassure him. "Vizette, you've done very well." "I didn't mean to imply," he began. "No, what you've done is substantial," she said. "It's mainly a matter of wording and argumentation now that you can revise." "That still troubles me," Vizette said, relieved despite himself. "You've already helped me so much." "If I had had to find all those animagus documents on my own, it would have taken much longer," she replied. "In that case, finishing even the first draft might have been delayed until after the holidays." "Don't overburden yourself," Professor McGonagall added more gently. "Take a proper rest. Enjoy the Christmas holidays." At that moment, Fred and George, rounding the corner, froze in place. Fred's jaw dropped. "George, is that Professor McGonagall's voice?" George squinted, incredulous. "If I'm not deafened by fireworks, then yes, it's her voice." "She actually told someone to relax," Fred protested. "Professor McGonagall has never told me that," George grinned. "Me neither. She only ever says you must finish the work I assigned." "Who's she telling to rest?" Fred asked, peering around the corner. "I want to see." "I want to see too," George echoed, and they both leaned out. "So it's Vizette," Fred said flatly after spotting him. "Fine. Leave him be." On the morning the Christmas holidays began, a heavy snow fell. With the long, low whistle of the train, woo-woo-woo, the Hogwarts Express slowly started and departed. The falling snow painted the world in white. The buildings and clusters of trees along the road blurred into pale outlines. That vast whiteness felt absolute to most people, except Luna. Luna watched the snow like a lazy cat, half tilting her head as she lay against the train window. She breathed on the glass and traced patterns with her finger, drawing delicate outlines in the mist. Now and then she turned to Vizette with a bright smile, urging him to look at what she had drawn. Vizette had brought plenty of snacks. Whenever Luna looked over, he would drop a treat into her hand. She would break it in half, and give him a piece. They drew and munched contentedly until the train reached its destination and came to a stop at platform 9 3/4, and neither of them felt particularly hungry. "My darling," a voice called out, trembling with excitement. "It's Dad!" Luna exclaimed, immediately looking toward the sound. Vizette began to pick up their luggage. "I'll take the bags," he told her. Luna chirped, then sprinted to meet Xenophilius. She threw herself into his arms. "Dad, I missed you so much. Dad, I missed you too." Xenophilius's voice broke. His eyes and nose were red from emotion. Vizette hauled the suitcase over and greeted him politely. "Mr. Lovegood, we're back." Xenophilius nodded toward Vizette with a grateful smile. "Good. Let's go home." "I feel relieved. Luna is doing well, and Vizette is doing well too." After a few months apart, Xenophilius looked very different. His hair, once a tousled mass like messy cotton candy, was now neatly groomed with hardly a stray strand. The stubble on his cheeks had been shaved away, and in a new purple and green color-blocked robe he looked positively sprightly. The robe was still conspicuously flashy, and he drew a few looks as they passed through King's Cross. "Let me take it," Xenophilius said, taking Luna's luggage. Luna hooked her arm through his and skipped happily as they left the station. Once they were out of the crush and onto the street, Xenophilius relaxed and began chattering about Hogwarts. Owls brought letters and postcards, and he read them constantly, but it wasn't the same as hearing Luna's voice. He needed to know for himself. "Are you settled at Hogwarts? How's the food? Don't go hungry," he asked. "Dad, I'm used to it, and I don't go hungry." Vizette and I made a discovery. The kitchens are near the Hufflepuff common room. You just have to find the fruit oil painting. "Fruit oil painting?" Xenophilius blurted. "We found it." "Oh, and Professor Snape," Luna's expression flickered. "He's potions. He can be prickly, but if you follow the steps on the board, he won't bother you. Vizette helps me study. We even formed a club. Have a day's rest at home tomorrow, and I'll take you shopping. Your clothes, everything. You said you caught a cold last time." He fretted. "Don't worry, I've recovered. Vizette can brew a refreshing potion. It's sweet and easy to drink. And Dad, don't worry about Hogwarts. It's fine." By the time they reached Ottery St. Catchpole, Xenophilius felt lighter than he had in months. The lawn by the path shimmered with an otherworldly silver glow. "Frigga!" Luna slipped out of his arm and darted toward it. The lawn seemed to part like a pool covered in duckweed, and from it rose an 8-legged horse. It stretched its neck for Luna, who pressed herself against its back and whispered like a lullaby, "I'm back. Did you like the berries and honey I sent?" The horse's ears twitched, and it gave a soft whinny, as if answering. It looked toward Vizette and Xenophilius, lifted its head toward the distant house shaped like a carriage, flicked its tail in greeting, and stepped into the lawn with Luna on its back. "He's probably taking Luna to the garden," Xenophilius said, picking up the luggage and quickening his pace. "Let's go too." Perhaps because of the wand that had been damaged by thunder, despite it being winter, the garden was lush and green, far from anything like frost or decay. Magical plants thrived, swaying in the cold wind without wilting. Luna drifted through it all as if dancing. The 8-legged horse padded along behind her, the silver light on its coat spilling over nearby leaves and petals. Luna reached out to stroke a lavender plant. The silver glow reflected in her bright eyes, and her face was all the joy of coming home. Xenophilius sniffed and choked up. "It's so good to see this. Something felt wrong before, like the garden was missing something." Vizette watched him and said, "Mr. Lovegood, cough, cough." Xenophilius coughed, blinking. "It's a bit cold. My nose is all red from the cold." "Be careful," Vizette said, smiling. "Don't catch a chill." "All right," Xenophilius answered, taking the luggage. "I'll go in and start dinner. You two come inside soon." "Come see this," Luna called, waving at Vizette. "Don't you think it's even nicer than the gardens at Hogwarts?" Vizette glanced back at Xenophilius's retreating figure, then ran toward Luna. "Coming." This Christmas felt quieter for Xenophilius than last year. The Quibbler had found an overseas market, and sales had increased. He was no longer a one-man show. He'd taken on staff and rented premises near Diagon Alley as an office, so he only needed to do the final proofs. With more free time, he could take Luna and Vizette shopping for articles and clothes for Christmas Eve. "I told you before I'd open a vault for you at Gringotts," he said one afternoon, pulling a golden key from his pocket in the marble main hall. He dangled it before Vizette. "This is the key. Take us to Mr. Lovegood's vault," Xenophilius told the goblin officiously. The goblin took the key and examined it with grave seriousness. "Follow me." A goblin guided them through the marble hall into a narrow corridor hung with torches. The light bounced down a line of small rails that ran away into the distance. Vizette habitually used his magic eye to survey unfamiliar places. He felt the map in his mind and noticed, as he had in other new spaces, a veil of mist over this section that would have to be dispersed. "Sir, ladies, please get on the cart," the goblin said indifferently. He whistled into the dark, and from the shadows a strangely shaped mining cart appeared, rattling toward them along the rails. 356. Fine snow, broken jade. Under the goblin's guidance, Vizette and his companions climbed into the minecart. With a series of urgent metallic squeals, the cart shot along the winding rails, the scenery outside blurring. It seemed to find its way by some enchantment, turning at junctions without further instruction from the goblin. Vizette opened his magic eye and drank in the ambient ancient magic power, channeling it into the wizard's combat guide. The guide grew restless. Its pages fluttered, and then one settled open, revealing a passage. Elementary magic forging. Master ancient magic power. Use ancient magic power to enhance metal properties. Imbue metal with specific traits. Goblins had long studied magic forging and metalworking to a depth few wizards matched. Wizards typically relied on goblins to craft and preserve magical artifacts. The records in Hogwarts, a history recalled that Godric Gryffindor once commissioned a goblin to forge a sword, the famed Sword of Gryffindor. After completing the work, the goblin coveted the blade and tried to reclaim it, reneging on the agreement. Godric Gryffindor drove the goblin off and warned that any further attempt would bring war. Given Gryffindor's power, the goblins desisted and never again tried to take the sword. Pages on forging continued to appear. Magic forging shared affinities with other branches of magic. Aligning them, however, required a broad foundation of knowledge. For Vizette, the forging techniques were fascinating, part alchemy, part precise control of fire. Unlike potion-making's sealed cauldron, magical forging fused metals and materials directly in fire, integrating alchemical properties into the metal so the effects could last. The goblin's craftsmanship and theories intrigued him. He wanted to know whether the elementary magic forging in his guide and goblin forging methods overlapped. But he kept the question to himself. The goblins were fiercely protective of their secrets. Asking them outright could be taken as theft and provoke an ugly response. The minecart eased to a stop before a metal door. The goblin called in a thin, sharp voice, "Sir, ladies, we have arrived." Xenophilius was the first to stumble out. His face was ashen, and he clutched his stomach, wobbling toward a corner and dry heaving. Luna hurried after him, useful calm in hand, patting his back and coaxing him until his retching eased. The goblin opened the vault, and a glittering pile of galleons, sickles, and nuts spilled into view. Xenophilius's color returned a little. He produced an account book with trembling fingers. "Count it," he said, voice thin. "I wrote everything down. You know the prices." Vizette watched him. Even pale and shaken, Xenophilius's manner was earnest. There was no hint of deceit, only a worried thoroughness. "Be careful," Xenophilius added. "I won't try to cheat you, but I could make a mistake. You should cross-check." The goblin's hands rubbed together, a smile that was all teeth. "Gringotts provides accounting services," it interjected smoothly. "If you fear miscounting, we can provide full service for a small." Xenophilius slapped his forehead as if remembering something. "Oh, I forgot one thing. Gringotts charges a safekeeping fee when you store galleons." He hesitated, then brightened with a horrible little triumph. "How many galleons was it per year? I forget. Anyway, if there's less inside, it's the safekeeping fee the goblins took." Outside, time had slipped to December 24th. Over Ottery St. Catchpole, low slate clouds hugged the roofs and a damp, ghostly wind threaded between the cottages. No snow had fallen yet, but Vizette had a plan he'd been cultivating since the previous year. He stepped into the garden, drew his wand, and lifted it to the sky. "Flurry of snowflakes," he chanted, moving his wrist in a slow, stirring arc. The clouds shifted as if churned in a great invisible basin. Their dull gray lightened to milky white. Then the first delicate snowflake drifted down and settled on Vizette's outstretched hand. More followed, soft, feathery flakes spiraling through the air. The damp, biting wind died away. The village stilled as if holding its breath, then exhaled into the hush of a gentle winter. When a blanket of white had muffled roofs and hedges, Vizette called Luna. She appeared in a little unicorn hat Xenophilius had insisted on, and a milky white, fluffy scarf wrapped round her neck. Although Luna had seen grander snows at Hogwarts, home snow felt different, gentler and full of small, precise joys. Vizette walked ahead, leaving a neat trail of footprints. Luna chased after him, then hurried to catch up until they were side by side. "Let's build a snowman," she cried, already scooping up powdery snow and rolling it into a small ball. Vizette smiled and did the same. They worked without magic, hands pressing the snow, carefully rolling and packing it until the two small spheres met and joined. Luna clapped, cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. Each breath made a little cloud that drifted away, carrying her bright grin into the quiet air. It wasn't until Xenophilius called from the doorway several times that Luna, who'd been having a wonderful time, finally stopped. She stood with her hands on her hips and regarded the carefully decorated snowmen with a satisfied nod. Both were plump and cheerful. One had 2 pieces of coal for eyes, was wrapped in a sky-blue blanket, and wore a restrained smile that still somehow radiated joy. The other had blue glass beads for eyes and a clearly oversized, colorful polka dot hat cocked at a jaunty angle, making its head tilt and giving it a mischievous energy. Luna took off her own scarf and wrapped it around the necks of both snowmen. She waved at the snowman in the blue blanket, then called back to Vizette. "Vizette, Dad's calling me back." Vizette laughed at the sight of the blush on Luna's face, then waved at the polka dot hatted snowman himself. "Luna, I should go back too." "Then let's go." Luna's smile brightened, her eyes squinting with pleasure as she looked at the real Vizette. "Too bad we didn't have time to build a dad." "Mr. Lovegood?" Vizette murmured. "I have an idea." He scooped up a handful of snow, touched it lightly with his wand, and the snow stretched and lengthened until it transformed into a pink and white parasol, cotton candy colors. Together, they held the parasol high. Under its small canopy, the 2 snowmen now had their own little world. At Luna's enthusiastic suggestion, Xenophilius had also bought new clothes and, at the department store, a handful of Muggle holiday things: colorful battery-powered bulbs, stickers with tiny bells, ribbons, balloons. After a few days of effort, the bulbs and ribbons were hung. When the 3 of them moved around the house, a gentle draft made the bell stickers tinkle, producing clear, pleasant sounds. On Christmas Eve, once everything was set, they finally brought out the balloons. Xenophilius picked up the air pump and pressed once, but the sudden blast of air from the nozzle made him jump. "It loads air with just one press?" Vizette grinned and took out his wand. "Mr. Lovegood, if you're not used to the pump, you can try the aguamenti charm." "Like this." Vizette poked the tip of his wand into a balloon's neck. "An air pump works the same way. You insert the nozzle into the opening, then push and pull." "Aguamenti?" Xenophilius looked puzzled. "Aren't we supposed to make the balloons fly? Why would we fill them with water?" "Aguamenti isn't only for making water come out," Vizette said, smiling. "The charm is about creating a flow. Think of it as directing movement. Once you understand the principle, you can make aguamenti release air instead of water. Like this. Aguamenti!" He cast the charm, and the balloons swelled instantly, perfectly round. "Aguamenti!" Luna copied him, and within breaths her balloon was full too. Xenophilius took his wand, considered, and tried. "Aguamenti?" Water sprayed from the tip of his wand, mingled with little puffs of air, as if the spell and his uncertainty were fighting for control. "Dad, you're amazing," Luna cried. "Mr. Lovegood, that's incredible for a first try," Vizette said at the same time. Xenophilius waved a hand awkwardly. "You don't need to flatter me," Vizette explained. "Mr. Lovegood, Luna and I have been experimenting with aguamenti since summer, trying to understand how it works. It wasn't until we came home this time that we really got it. You only heard the explanation once, and you already grasped the idea. That's remarkable." "Yes, Dad." Luna grabbed Xenophilius's arm and pouted possessively. "You're the best." He smiled. If I study it a bit more, I'll do it properly. For now, I'll still use this pump. Let's see who's faster." Before they could have the contest, another problem arose. Xenophilius hadn't tied off the balloon he'd inflated. He let it go, and it whistled away, making a long series of noises as it rose. You have to tie a knot like this. Vizette demonstrated. He stretched the balloon's neck, looped it around his thumb and forefinger, pinched, and then twisted and pulled the opening to seal it. Wait. Xenophilius rubbed his eyes. That was a bit quick. I didn't get it. Luna picked up a balloon and moved closer. I didn't see clearly either. How do you do it? She worried a little about the balloon slipping and floating away, so she pinched the neck tight. Vizette offered gently, Shall I guide your hand and show you? Luna nodded earnestly, concentration settling on her face. Look, it's like this. Vizette stretched the balloon's opening, trying to leave space around Luna's fingers. You're pinching it very tightly already. You just need to wrap it once. Hold the balloon neck in my hand. The opening was tiny, and their fingers inevitably brushed. Maybe it was the phoenix mark he bore, but Vizette's fingers were warm. When Luna touched them, she felt the gentle warmth of tea. Luna's fingers were a little cool in contrast. When Vizette touched them, he thought of delicate, clear crystal. Vizette glanced up. Luna had the same fleeting thought. Their eyes met, then both lowered their heads at once, returning their attention to the balloon. Vizette handed the neck back to Luna. You pinch it, pull it back, and that's it. Oh, so that's how! Xenophilius suddenly understood and moved quickly. He stretched the balloon neck extra long, and as he tried to loop it around his finger, there was a loud pop. The balloon burst and fragments stuck in his hair. Luna reached out to help remove bits of rubber. Xenophilius laughed uneasily. Ahem, I've already mastered the principle. That was just a mistake. Vizette nodded calmly. It's normal. A few balloons have poor elasticity and burst. Exactly. That's all, Xenophilius said, relieved. Vizette, you're so understanding. Tying the knot wasn't easy for him. His fingers were thicker, and after he burst a couple more balloons, he decided to go start dinner, leaving Luna and Vizette to inflate the rest. Luna's technique was still clumsy at first, but with Vizette's patient guidance, she grew steadier. More and more balloons filled the room, their colors reflecting the warm firelight. The house itself seemed to grow warmer. The bright balloons, the blush climbing from earlobe to neck, and the steady glow of the hearth made everything feel cozy and alive. It was well past midnight on Christmas Eve. Vizette eased the front door closed, crept down to the sitting room on the ground floor, and began tucking presents into the stockings hanging over the fireplace. Luna loved the story of Santa Claus, so she had insisted on the red stockings with ribbons and tiny balloons. Just as Vizette slid a gift into Luna's stocking and reached for the next one, he heard faint footsteps from upstairs. He stepped back toward the kitchen and waited. A rustle from the living room, then another set of footsteps. Luna appeared in a pink and blue nightgown. When she spied Vizette, she gave a mischievous wink with one eye and covered her mouth to stifle a laugh, ducking into the kitchen with him. The footsteps belonged to Xenophilius. His puzzled voice drifted down the hall. This is Luna's stocking. Why is there something in it? Vizette wouldn't send a book, would he? Never mind. This is Vizette's stocking. What did Luna send? It's square, too. Could it be a book? Oh no. Vizette's diligence. Wouldn't be catching, would it? They're both Ravenclaws. There's nothing to be done. Just as Vizette and Luna were about to come out, Xenophilius's footsteps faded away. When the house fell quiet, Vizette whispered, Merry Christmas, and pulled the gifts from the stockings. Luna's voice trilled with amusement. The present she had brought was square as well. They sat facing each other and unwrapped the first gifts. Vizette's present to Luna was a picture book. Luna's present to Vizette was a photo frame. You can draw on it, Luna said, handing him a crystal-tipped pen she had slipped into the book. She took the pen and traced the outline of a rabbit. A faint glow gathered, and a snow-white rabbit rose from the page, hopping free of the book. Vizette pressed the frame's edge, and a scatter of real leaves sheltered inside it floated up and arranged themselves in midair, stacking and turning, until a tiny scene took shape, him throwing a quaffle through a hoop. The magic was simple, the levitation charm. But the idea was clever. Choosing the leaves, arranging their colors and movement, tuning the levitation just so. This required patience, ingenuity, and an eye for detail. In Vizette's view, only Luna could mix all those qualities so perfectly and give them away without reserve. I really like it, he said. Good night, Luna replied. They spoke at the same time and laughed together. Then, as quietly as they had come, they slipped the other gifts they'd meant to hide into Xenophilius's stocking and left. Vizette returned to his room, lay on his bed, and stared up at the ceiling, thinking of Luna stooping to pick leaves on the Hogwarts lawns. Sleep came slowly. On Christmas morning, Vizette was woken by a commotion downstairs, pounding and a high, familiar voice repeating, "Dobby cannot leave here. Dobby already belongs to Mr. Lovegood." He leapt from bed, alert. He moved quickly, calling on a protective meditation technique while summoning a magic eye to take in the house, and drew his wand, his expression hardening. The pounding continued. Dobby? The name clicked. A house elf. He kept his guard up until he reached the sitting room and saw the scene for himself. Luna and Xenophilius were there and unhurt. The sight eased him a little. Vizette, come and see. What's happening? Xenophilius looked up from the middle of the room. He keeps saying he belongs to Mr. Lovegood, but he won't listen to me. He just stood there and kept hurting himself, Luna added. He said it was a punishment to show remorse. Dobby, bent and shuddering, turned toward Vizette and resumed his punishment, bowing and banging his head against the floor until blood ran. The metallic tang of it filled the air. Vizette frowned. Stop, he ordered. Dobby halted mid-bow, head bowed, letting the blood trickle onto the floor. Luna hurried forward with a mortar filled with crushed herbs. Dittany, it looked like. Here, she said, you can use this to stop the bleeding. Dobby made no move except to remain bowed and trembling. Vizette took a breath and asked, Why are you here? Master, I am, your house elf. I will diligently serve you. Dobby's voice shook with fear. He shuffled closer, then forced himself to produce a folded envelope and presented it with both hands. Vizette opened it and found Lucius Malfoy's signature on the outer seal. Inside were two parchments. One was a brief, formal note. Your loyal Lucius Malfoy presents you with a gift. The other was an official-looking certificate from the Ministry of Magic's House Elf Relocation Office. Dobby was now registered as Vizette's property. Vizette. Luna pressed the mortar into his hands. Dobby is bleeding a lot. I understand. I'll take care of it. Vizette kept his smile steady, though questions crowded his mind. Why would Lucius Malfoy send him a house elf as a present? Why the pompous note about loyalty? He steered the situation into practical action. Come with me. Dirt begone. He flicked his wand. He and Luna watched as the bloodstains on the sitting room floor scrubbed themselves away. Then Vizette led Dobby to the bedroom and handed him the mortar. Dobby flinched back and resumed his self-punishment reflexively, but Vizette was firm. Stop! You are not allowed to hurt yourself without my command. Dobby drew a long, stunned breath and looked up at him. Vizette repeated, Apply the medicine. It's Dittany. Easy to stop the bleeding. Yes, my master. Dobby took the mortar with trembling hands. Resigned, he closed his eyes and pressed the herbal paste to his battered forehead. There was a little hissing sound as the herb worked, and the wound sealed quickly. What remained was a smear of dried blood in his hair, a grisly reminder of how badly he had been treating himself. 359, a beacon guiding lost ships, according to the contents above. Vizette held up the Ministry of Magic certificate. No matter what order I give, you must obey it, right? Dobby made a 90-degree bow, his voice trembling. Yes, my master. You only accept my orders? Vizette asked. Or, can you still obey the orders of your previous master? Dobby hurried to reply, voice shaking. My master, I can only accept your orders. Thump, thump, thump. A knock at the door, and Xenophilius's voice floated in. Vizette, why don't you let that house elf put away the Christmas presents? Dobby looked up, blinking his round tennis ball eyes as if waiting for instructions. Not knowing Lucius's exact purpose, Vizette didn't intend to let Dobby do anything more than necessary. Dobby, clean the blood off yourself, and then stay by my side. The Christmas gifts Vizette had received this year were more numerous than last. Besides presents from professors and friends, he'd gotten gifts from students in other houses. Those admirers he'd convinced himself had lost interest. Some were stationery and books, many were sweets, chocolate being by far the most common. Xenophilius emerged from the kitchen, looked at the temporarily conjured shelves, and, surprised, asked, Vizette, what have you been up to at Hogwarts? Luna covered her mouth and giggled, helping explain. He dueled Professor Snape. Xenophilius's eyes widened. Did he win? I suffered a crushing defeat. Professor Snape is very powerful, Vizette admitted, shaking his head. I learned a lot from it. Oh, don't be discouraged. You're still a student. Xenophilius patted him on the shoulder. Snape is formidable. Apart from a few universally disliked fellows, not many students would dare provoke him. Vizette sniffed and asked, Do you smell something? Smell? They all sniffed, trying to identify it. A plant scent? Lavender? Xenophilius sniffed again, puzzled. I smell something different. I understand. Vizette fished his wand out quickly and waved it toward the shelves. Reveal the trace. A puff of golden dust streamed from the wand tip, turned black in the air, and settled onto some of the chocolate boxes. What's that? Black. Xenophilius frowned. Did someone try to poison you? A Slytherin prank? There is a potion mixed in. It doesn't look like poison. Vizette set those chocolates aside. Mr. Lovegood, I'll take them back to my room and examine them. You're a potions master now, Xenophilius said with a grin. Be careful. Thank you, Mr. Lovegood. Vizette made the shelves float with a wave of his wand and followed them back to his room. Once inside, Vizette set the shelves down and conjured a small stool for Dobby. Dobby, sit. Let's continue our earlier conversation. Dobby's voice shot up with incredulous squeaks, like nails on a blackboard. Master, you want me to sit down? Yes, sit down! Vizette repeated firmly. Tell me why you showed up at Hogwarts and attacked Harry with a bludger. He had extracted Dobby's memory and handed the silver strand to Dumbledore without looking over it, so there were many details he still didn't know. Dobby's master at the time had been Lucius Malfoy. To avoid questions, Dobby had even harmed himself rather than answer. His hands trembled as he began. Master, because Lucius Malfoy intended to use. Use what? Vizette raised an eyebrow. Don't evade my question. Dobby's whole body shuddered and sweat beaded on his skin. What you left behind. It's the key to opening the Chamber of Secrets. The words drained Dobby of all strength. He collapsed onto the stool. Something I left behind? Vizette's expression sharpened. I command you, do not hide anything. Explain everything clearly. Tell me everything you know, including the secrets Lucius Malfoy is hiding. Hold nothing back. Yes, my master, Dobby continued, still trembling, and then related what he knew. When Dobby finished, Vizette smiled wryly. So you and Lucius, after guessing back and forth, concluded that I was Lord Voldemort? And because at that time, I took on Lord Voldemort's appearance to extract your memory, then frightened you and said I was studying you, that sealed it? Vizette added. At the name Voldemort, Dobby flinched and rolled off the stool. Yes, no matter how you put it, it was too similar. Vizette's expression softened. Have you been punishing yourself too much? Do you need a potion to treat it? Dobby scrambled to his feet, waving his hands frantically. No potion! No potion! Did Professor Snape take you to Malfoy Manor? Vizette asked, changing course, looking to the shelves. You're sure it was on a Saturday afternoon? Dobby nodded quickly. Yes, master. Vizette's hand landed on a present from Dumbledore on the shelf. Inside the box, along with a parchment, was a clear glass vial with a thin layer of colorless liquid and a silver memory strand. He really is prophetic, Vizette muttered. He uncorked the vial. His amused smile turned into surprise. Phoenix tears. The pale liquid in the vial was indeed phoenix tears, an extraordinarily rare and powerful magical ingredient. Even applied directly to a wound, they have remarkable healing properties. In Vizette's experience, unless someone was struck by an exceptionally powerful curse, phoenix tears could likely undo it. He slipped the vial into his inner pocket and fitted the silver memory strand to his temple, watching the memory play. It matched Dobby's account. He opened his eyes and read the 2 lines on the parchment. Perhaps an unintentional act, like a lighthouse by the sea, will guide lost ships back to shore. The more ships that dock, the more ships can be used. 360. How to get along with Dobby. Vizette slid the parchment into his pocket. Dobby, you just said Lucius Malfoy is a Death Eater. What was his position back then? Dobby stammered. He was one of he who must not be named's loyal followers. Vizette rubbed his brow, not interested in arguing with the house elf's impressions. Finish what you have to say, all at once. That's an order. From now on, you'll answer me like that. Dobby trembled, but went on haltingly. Malfoy Manor, it was often where they met. He was trusted with important things. Dark artifacts, gold, treasures. They were kept in Malfoy Manor. So he was a core member? Vizette murmured. Dumbledore's note suddenly made more sense. If the Malfoys could be brought back into line, it would be a useful opening. Vizette thought about what he'd learned of Voldemort over the years. His methods weren't subtle. He ruled through extreme pressure, intimidation, collusion, manipulation to keep his followers in line, and he smashed all opposition with slaughter, coercion, and torture. That was why he inspired such widespread terror. That terror, the random strikes, the dark mark as a summons, those things kept wizards perpetually on edge, afraid even to speak his name. Anyone who had lived through that era could still feel the echo of it. Vizette came back to the present and looked at Dobby. As a house elf, he was unusual. He had not obeyed Lucius unquestioningly. He left the manor without permission over the Chamber of Secrets key, and he'd used magic on his own to try to protect Harry. Dobby could tell right from wrong. He had a courage and an independence that set him apart. Lucius had treated him as a tool, something to beat and scold, but Dobby had thoughts and feelings, and he'd found ways to resist. Vizette reached out. Dobby flinched, instinctively cowering, and trembled violently. Vizette grabbed his arm and pulled him back onto the stool, then let out a slow breath and softened his tone. Dobby, how do you see yourself? What do you like? Dobby twisted his arm slightly, staring at Vizette with bewildered eyes. Master? Tell me honestly. Vizette's voice was gentle. What do you like? What do you need? Dobby's whole body shook. Tears overflowed. No one has ever asked Dobby what he truly likes or what he needs. He sobbed until embarrassment stifled the crying. Then, in a choked voice, he whispered, Master, you aren't he who must not be named, are you? Vizette said nothing. Dobby pressed on. He who must not be named. He is very cruel, very terrible. But you are not like that. You even let me cry. When Dobby served the Malfoys, if he had nothing to do, they made him punish himself. You're with me now, Vizette said quietly. Tears slipped from Dobby's face again, but he regained his composure faster this time. His voice steadied. Master, no, Vizette, I like to work, but I want to wear clothes, and I want freedom. Vizette nodded. That confirmed his impression. Dobby wanted more than the usual house elf lot. He wanted to be treated as a person. That made things simpler. From now on, don't call me Master. Call me Vizette. Call my family Luna and Mr. Lovegood by their names as well. Dobby nodded so fast his head bobbed. Yes. Vizette, you want to work, to wear clothes, and to have freedom. You'll work for me here, and I will pay you a wage. Vizette kept his tone even. You can buy clothes freely, and you'll have holidays, regular ones, and sick leave. Is that acceptable? Vizette. Dobby drew a deep breath. His eyes went hazy, dreamlike. Is this a dream? Dobby would not even dare to hope for such things. Vizette's face hardened a little. There are limits. Because of your past actions, I don't trust you completely yet. I need to be clear about that. I will be honest with you, and I expect the same. Anything that involves other people, you must tell me. An example. When Lucius took out the chamber key and you worried about Harry's safety and tried to help, you should have informed me first. He reached into a bag and took out a school uniform, placing it in front of Dobby. If you cannot be upfront, then I know giving you a single piece of clothing would grant you true freedom. I will do that, rather than keep someone I can't trust by my side. At the mention of clothes, Dobby reacted as if struck. He stumbled back, shaking his head wildly. No clothes. Dobby wants to work here. They would not have treated Dobby like this. They would not have paid Dobby a wage. They would not have given Dobby holidays. They would not give Dobby what he wants. Dobby wants to stay here. Dobby will prove himself. Dobby will not disappoint the great Vizette. Dobby promises. Dobby does not want clothes. Vizette smiled faintly and nodded. Very well. Welcome to the household. We should discuss your salary now.